Interest in the flat earth conspiracy is on the rise. Peak searches increasing since 2015 don't seem to be going backwards in any shape or form. But why is that? A recent TV show on the UK's Good Morning TV saw Martin Kenny presenting his case for the moon landings being a hoax. Callers calling in created a survey where 41% of them agreed the moon landings were a hoax, to the surprise and dismay of the guest who came from NASA, and to the lady on the right reading out the results. In a Forbes magazine published on the Forbes website, 2/3 of millennials believe the Earth is round, which means 33% of all 18 to 25-year-olds have woken up to the truth that the Earth is flat. So how about YouTube and the social media platforms? What are they doing about this? Let's have a look.
I want to know how you're dealing with all these conspiracy theorists on your platform.
So the first way is by demoting low-quality content and promoting more authoritative content, and the second is by providing more transparency for users. So we're introducing boxes that provide factual information at the top of results that have shown themselves to turn up a lot of information that is counterfactual, such as searching for the Earth is flat on YouTube, where you see a lot of
Your response is to put a box saying, nope, the Earth is not flat.
Correct.
Okay.
Which is surprising because YouTube really doesn't need to censor flat Earth, right? It's just a silly little conspiracy, right? Okay, let's pretend. If I could take you back to 1952, before NASA was formed, and we had our so-called Earth photos from space, how would you describe to your child proof that the Earth is a globe? Maybe you'd use a boat going over the horizon, something you could observe for yourself. Perfectly reasonable claim going back 50 years. But these days, high optics, P900 cameras, the P1000 cameras, we can see boats disappear over the horizon with our naked eyes, only to find out that they've only disappeared due to perspective. The vanishing point that we all learnt in our art class shows us here in this example how the whole hull of the boat can be brought back into view. Now these distances are way beyond our eyesight now, and it goes to show we were easy to fool when we didn't have these cameras, but nowadays there's videos like this all over the internet showing that the curvature, alleged curvature, does not see your boats going over the horizon. Instead, they're always there, they're just out of your eyesight. How about going out to do observation tests? Surely all we need to do is just figure out what is the rate of curvature of the globe, and we can go and observe those things, right? That should be easy, shouldn't it? Here's the curvature maths for everyone to see. 8 inches to the mile squared. So at 50 miles we should observe 1666 feet of curvature. Well, these days we have so many amateur footage photography, there's plenty of examples of people not participating in this experiment but happily providing the evidence for us. So let's look at this one, a famous shot by now in the flat earth community by Joshua Nowicki. It's across the Hudson Bay and we can see the Chicago skyline in all its glory. Only the problem is here, the Sears Tower on the left is 1700 feet tall. It should be missing. In fact, the whole skyline should show nothing. We shouldn't see these buildings. 1800 feet of curvature should be witnessed. This is quite a reasonable endeavour, don't you think? Because curvature is something we can all go and prove for ourselves. We can debunk this flat earth theory easily, surely, if we just go out and observe these curvature examples ourselves. Here's another great example. It's the world record, long distance photography record. It's 275 miles away, the Finistrels mountain range in France. The trouble is with this one is we can see 443 kilometers, which is 275 miles, and there should be well over 3 miles of curvature even when we factor in the height of the observer. Do you see the trouble we're having now? We should be able to observe the curvature. Here's another great example. It's Canigou in France again, and what Jeren is doing on his channel here is showing the sun setting into the distance, a full 175 miles away. The entire mountain range should be hidden behind curvature. And the sun is beautifully showing us how the mountain range is still visible from top to bottom. It should be completely hidden behind 12,380 feet of curvature. Let's have another look at that. This is one of the marketing shots from Provence. A tourist board's marketing video shows the sun beautifully setting behind the Canigou mountain range. These observations are quite straightforward, and yet the more we try and look for them, the curvature, the more difficult it's becoming. In fact, we haven't found one proof that curvature can be observed. Here's another simple test. If we get in a high altitude balloon or plane, we should be able to observe the horizon dropping below our eye level. So on the right we can see what would happen if we were living on a flat Earth, where the horizon stretches out in front of us but remains at eye level. And then on the left you can see the globe model, where the horizon should drop as we rise and it should not rise up to the eye level. So let's see what we do see. The top picture is 110,000 feet on an amateur balloon footage. The middle picture is 30,000 feet altitude, where we're cruising in an aeroplane. And then down on the bottom is down at sea level. Notice each horizon is at eye level, which proves we are not living on a ball. The other concrete piece of proof is the way water behaves. Water has always got to be contained, and it always seeks and finds its level. When we pour water into test tubes, rivers, lakes and oceans, the water's property never changes. It stays flat. So our longest rivers, like the Nile and the Amazon, should allegedly be going uphill. As we curve around these well over 1,000 miles long length, we should be witnessing hundreds of miles of curvature, and water does not bend, it does not go up a hill, and its property always to seek and find its level. The Earth is supposed to be 71% water. So how is that possible on a globe when we know water always seeks and finds its level? This next proof is when we're on an aeroplane, we have the artificial horizon shown by the dial on the middle there. It should roll back because inside the artificial horizon is a gimbal or a gyroscope, which is spun up on the runway to set the attitude of the plane. And as the plane takes off and hits its cruising altitude, it remains at that altitude for the duration of the flight. And yet, if we were supposed to be on a ball on the long-haul flights, say from the UK down to India, we would need to change the orientation of the plane. And that artificial horizon should roll back. The other thing which puzzles me is when we're on the southern hemisphere of the globe, these planes should be upside down. We ought to be able to witness this from outer space or the space station. We ought to be able to zoom in to see aeroplanes flying at all manners of orientation. The data on the right here, shown with some flight tracking software, shows that the US's entire east to west coast and trans-American flights always maintain that altitude, 2,400 miles of consistent altitude. Why would this data be fudged to show a flat Earth when we should be living on a globe? This data should witness the curvature. And one more final point about the gimbal or the gyroscope is the property of a gyroscope is that it always maintains its rigidity in space. That's how we know that we're not flying around a ball, because the artificial horizon is always maintained at the same level. It doesn't roll back. Long-haul flights. When we fly from Sydney to Santiago, the long-haul flights take huge dog legs, almost like an isosceles triangle, up to Singapore, India and Dubai. Crazy lengths to come back down to Santiago. These are long-haul flights that should be a straight hop underneath the globe over the shortest distance between 2 points, i.e. the Antarctic region, but that never happens. These flights don't exist. If we took the AE map, the azimuthal equidistant map, we can see that these flights make a lot more sense. We're actually going through Dubai, Singapore, and we're doing pretty much a straight shot, which makes perfect sense to stop for refuel. The other crazy contradiction is when you really think about it, if the Earth is spinning 1,000 miles an hour around the equator, then as we go up the ball, those distances reduce. And if we were flying north to south, then surely we must have to make provision for all of that east to west momentum. We'd have to be very careful about how we flew. And if the ball was spinning 1,000 miles an hour underneath us, that's a crazy trajectory to come in at and land safely. Equally, if we flew east to west or west to east, one direction we're flying with the spin and the other direction we're flying against the spin. So how is it these distances and speeds are not hugely important when factoring in flight times? They're always pretty much the same time, give or take a bit for wind. So let's ask a real pilot and see what he says in his cockpit.
G'day guys,
How you going?
just a fellow PPL,
Oh yes.
you know,
Mike.
but yeah. Casey, how are you, mate?
Yeah.
Pleased to meet you guys.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I've been flying
Yeah.
and I've come to the conclusion
Yeah.
there is no curvature. I never allow for curvature. There's no way there's curvature. We're round and flat, aren't we?
Definitely.
We are, aren't we?
Flat as a
Thank
pancake,
you,
mate.
sir.
Flat as a pancake.
We're so, and the outer ring is south,
Yeah.
and so north must be in the middle, correct?
Possibly.
That
Yeah.
would be the only way that a
Yeah.
magnetic compass works on a flat plane.
Might be onto something there.
Yeah,
Might be
but
onto something.
you're not having me on. We
No,
are.
I'm having you
We're
on.
round and flat,
Flat
aren't
as a
we?
pancake, mate. Yeah. There you go.
Thank you, man.
No worries.
You made my
Only
day.
the people at Jetstar know that.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, even the pilots will confess to being flat earthers. But the trouble is, those that do confess tend to have a hard time and they get grounded. So why would they come out under all that corporate pressure and they need to keep their jobs? So let's look at the movements of the Earth. First of all, we're spinning 1,000 miles an hour around the equator, and the entire set of planets in our solar system is allegedly moving 67,000 miles an hour, chasing the sun 450,000 miles an hour around the galaxy. So with all these speeds, we'd expect a lot of movement in the stars as we observe them, wouldn't we? Well, actually, that's not the case. The pyramids at Giza have been lining up to the Orion's belt for centuries and probably millennia. And if we set up a time-lapse photography overnight, we can see perfect concentric circles every single night around the pole star. So if these constellations are not moving and North's a pole star, how on earth are we moving at all these speeds? Okay, now let's look at NASA themselves, because most people would turn to NASA for their photography, right? To prove the globe.
Mission abort. Repeat. Mission abort.
Explorer, this is Kowalski confirming visual contact with debris. Debris is from a BSE sat. Repeat. I have it right.
Dr. Stone requesting faster transport.
We have to go. We have to go. Go.
Kennedy reports meteorological conditions. Don't go.
Sorry, wrong special effects department. I meant NASA. Here's the 1974 Apollo 16 moon lander takeoff. Notice how close the horizon is to the lander. Notice we can't see any stars. And notice that the cameraman is on the moon and the camera actually pans up as the lander takes off. Let's have a look and see what you think. Is this real?
Port stage pushed. Engine arm is out. Okay, I'm going to get the pro. 99 proceeded. 3, 2, 1. Ignition. Right away, Houston. Vector grid. Ag side. Pitch over.
Roger, you have good thrust.
Pretty strange, don't you think, that at the time these were fantastic images and videos, but it's so easy to tell now this is fake. Surely you're not looking at this thinking, yeah, that's real. Watch the takeoff again. Look at the sparks around the lander. Okay, I hope that's enough for you to think Hollywood are doing a better job today than they were then. Interesting that NASA has the largest film studio in the world. They're also the biggest consumers of helium on the planet. So when you think about satellites, check out YouTube for satellites launching on hot air balloons. And also, do yourself a favour, go and Google pictures of Earth from space and pictures of satellites from space and see if you can find a real one. Here is that lunar lander. Do you think this is going to sustain and withstand all of the pressures of a high at -10 torr vacuum? Do you think this can really take off from the moon? I ask people on the street, especially women, I say, would you put your children inside this and submerge it underwater? And they all say no. Pretty easy to see why. And then there are these gentlemen, obviously delighted about the biggest achievement in human history, riding on the crest of a wave as they come back to Earth, survive the most amazing journey, feat of human endeavour and technological advancement. They face the world with delight and happiness as they look at their adoring fans. Okay, I'm being sarcastic, but you can tell these guys are weighed down with guilt. They're not happy, and all their answers were really shifty and not acceptable. And how about the Challenger? The crew of the Challenger, who all died allegedly in 1986. 6 of these people have eerily got twin brothers or lifelike lookalikes today, and some of them have got the same names. Take a look at this picture now and you'll see those people today are still living. They still have the same names, and they have teaching jobs or legal jobs or professor jobs. Take a look at this one. It's the space shuttle in the 80s again, and there's clearly someone in the background. Can you see? There, his forehead, his eyes and his nose. This is clearly a model. And whatever this gentleman was doing, he was either keen to be seen or he was messing about with some of the equipment. Maybe he was trying to change the angle of something in the background. But when you see him in the background, it's clearly a man. And it's clearly a film set with a model. Here's another example of how all the females at NASA had a crazy idea that making their hair stand up on end with hairspray might fool the viewing public into thinking that we were in 0G. But when they move around, you can see their hair is really starched into one position. And I hardly think that the lady on the top left would really be allowed in a life and death situation, which, let's face it, in the ISS at 17,500 miles an hour, you'd want that hair tied back, wouldn't you? Or at least under wraps so it couldn't interfere with all the wires and cables with the equipment behind. Seems to be okay though with NASA. Then we have this footage, which is clearly people on harnesses and wires. As you can see, the gentleman on the right is pulling the gentleman on the left's cable. It must have got caught. Why do they need cables when they're supposed to be in 0G? Here's another one where they use VR and harnesses in this clip. You can see the guy in the background is supposed to be floating in 0G, and yet they forgot to wipe out the cable and the harness, which is attached to his belt. The VR is used to spin things like the cap, and it always gives that illusion of that you're in 0G. And this is done by layering. And the gentleman on the left thinks he's doing something similar. Look how his hand grabs something, swaps hands and puts it down beside him. He's wearing contact lenses, which you use in VR, so that you can see what layer is going from A to B, and you can move your hands accordingly. Only this time, the guys didn't move the object and put the layer on. Big mistake. So now let's move to those all-important blue marble shots, the ones we've had every year since 2015. If you watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, you'll see how they managed to fake the image, the very first image that NASA gave us back in 1974, which interestingly was the final trip back from the moon. Don't you think they would want to take a moon shot a lot earlier than that? Anyhow, would you be surprised to hear that the next picture taken from space of the Earth was 2012. Robert Simmons here is a graphic visualizer for NASA, and he comes on a radio show and says, I take narrow strips of data and I layer them together, I stitch them together, and then I paste the clouds on. And I have to do this. I have to use Photoshop. Now, why would he say it has to? Could it be because there's no image of Earth from space in its entirety? Here are all the blue marble shots now. where we can see all of the images have various different colours. The continents are the same. America is really different in size. Look at 2012's America. It's huge. Compare it to, say, 2007. It's much, much bigger. Here's evidence of the clone tool being used. Photoshop's really good at doing that. So you can copy and paste the clouds. They must have got lazy here. Why does NASA need to do this when all they need to do is take a picture from when they're in space? Here's another really, really poor quality image. It comes from the ISS allegedly. Look at the size of Italy. It takes up pretty much the whole of the northern hemisphere. The scaling is appalling, and no country would be lit up like this without clouds. Let's listen to NASA themselves. Surely they'll tell us they can go back to the moon. It's been a while, hasn't it?
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
Excuse me? Did he just say, but we can't go back, and we've destroyed the technology? Do you think that's a sensible thing to be doing? When we listen to those that hold the tapes, all the reels, hundreds of reels of footage, that's all been destroyed as well. And all the telemetry data has also been destroyed. So why did NASA allow this advancement of technology to go backwards? Could it be they just don't want to go back? They're making excuses? And yet for some reason we can go to Mars as well. Is that realistic? When I first came to Flat Earth, this was the first image I thought of. The Felix Baumgarten's high jump. He reached the Earth's outer atmosphere and he jumped out of a capsule. I remember seeing those curved images really clearly. But as he left his capsule, the image on the left here shows a perfectly straight horizon. And why would that be? It's the lens used in the camera. The one on the left is a non-fisheye lens and the one on the right is a fisheye lens. The reason we can tell this is because New Mexico below him takes up the entire horizon. It takes up all of the space below him. Now we know that that's not realistic. It's not right. And if the Earth was spinning 1,000 miles an hour around the equator, then do you think Felix would have landed somewhere a bit further than 50 miles away from the place he set off? I think so. Going back to the early 50s, we find this gentleman, Sir Admiral Byrd, who'd finished a 30-year exploration with the US military of the Antarctic region beyond the South Pole. On a TV show called the Longines Chronoscope, he was asked, "Is there any land beyond the South Pole?" And he said, "Yes, I've found land the size of America. It will be the envy of the nations with coal, uranium and gas, and all the nations will be scrambling over it." But did that happen? No. We saw Operation Fishbowl between the Americans and the Russians, who fired up atomic warheads into the Earth's outer atmosphere for 2 solid years. Why would they do that? Again, shortly after Sir Admiral Byrd's expedition, he died mysteriously a year afterwards, and the Antarctic Treaty was formed. 52 nations signed up to this, effectively locking down Antarctica, such that anyone who wishes to go there now needs to submit a business plan. It needs to be signed off like a planning permission by all the nations, and you need a $2 million license fee to explore. So yes, you can go there, but you're on a guided tour. You're actually not allowed to go off-piste. If you do, you get a military escort back. That's already happened. And look at the UN map. The UN map is actually exactly the same as a flat Earth map. Now, why would they do that? Are they trying to tell us something? So they've locked down the entire perimeter of our Earth so we can't venture out, a bit like the Truman Show. And they found something above us which could be what would be perceived as, you know, an enclosed system, or perhaps somewhere which can't be penetrated. So Antarctica's closed, and I thoroughly recommend looking at this video by Taboo Conspiracy, Sorry We're Closed, as it goes into the treaty in more detail. You might ask, why would someone lie about this big thing if it really is a conspiracy? Well, firstly, money. NASA get $19 billion a year. That's $52 million a day just to support cartoons, CGI. Yes, they fire rockets up, but if you watch rockets, they always go off into a curved trajectory, and they never make it up and out of the atmosphere all on camera. When that moment comes, you always get a CGI. So what happened? Do you think they found out? And do you think they'd confess? Do you think they'd come clean? Well, have a think about that board meeting. Science has been taking the front seat on a lot of things in recent decades. We've had the theory of evolution, we've had the Big Bang theory, we've had the globe theory, and we've had the theory of gravity and relativity. If we have to confess that the Earth is flat, then we have to be honest about all sorts of other things too. Do you think science would want to take a back seat? Do you think they'd allow religion to take a front seat? It would be very tempting for religions to say, I told you so. We live in a created space. And if you are the number one authority for centuries, are you going to admit that there is now someone more powerful than you who created this space? Stock markets would also crash. You'd have mayhem. Universities would have to be retooled from the ground up. You'd have to reinvent so many things based on the presumptions of a globe. Now, I'm suggesting this is just speculation, but I'm suggesting I don't think they had a choice. I think they needed to keep it going. They created NASA shortly afterwards, who gave us the blue marble shot, and then it was a done deal. Now they've made it a closed and shut case. But people are waking up to this. They're waking up to the moon landings being a hoax, and that's a big deal. To suddenly reconfigure how you are and who you are and where you are suddenly becomes super important. So imagine you're a parent of a 5-year-old and you have to explain to them how you would prove that the Earth is a globe. Given what you've seen already, how would you do it today? Most flat earthers take their time over this and they think, well, I can debunk this, no problem. And they go down the rabbit hole of trying to prove the globe. And what's interesting is there is no proof of a globe. In fact, there are hundreds of proof it's not a globe, and many, many proofs that it's flat. So I just ask you, having watched this, take a look at these things for yourself. Go and test and measure yourself. Next time you're in a plane, have a look at the horizon. Next time you're looking over a stretch of water, see how far you can see. Go on the websites that give you the curvature maths and figure out, can you witness any curvature? Think about the behaviour of water and come back to me if you can find proof of a globe. We've been looking for years now and we're still looking. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you now take up the challenge of trying to prove the globe.